Thank you, everybody, for tuning in once again to Coder Conversations. Tonight we have Qualhata Williams, digital
Oh, sorry.
marketer.
Sorry, it's Quahada. Do you want to start?
Qualhata, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry about that.
no worries.
And but yeah, if you want to tune into any previous episodes, make sure to visit us at www.coderconvos.com. So yeah, just to get things started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get in your current role?
Yeah, well, I started when I was 19, 20. I actually started off at a small PR firm. I was working with finding different press placements for, the local acts like Davies, I think it was A Boogie. Um, I'm missing a few, but I was working with this woman at the time, and we were, just she was teaching me how to basically do PR at a indie space, and I thought that was really interesting. But I think it wasn't something that I wanted to do long term. But I think it allowed me access into rooms to be able to meet new people, and I knew eventually I wanted to go more into, a label space, a more corporate setting, to be able to make impact on that level. So it was a great opportunity. I ended up meeting, an A&R that helped me end up getting my first internship with at Hot 97. And I ended up working with DJ Drewski for, quite some time. I was working with
Oh,
him,
wow.
and it was an interesting time. I was doing like articles, interviews, and I think that again that allowed me to
It's
experience,
exciting.
yeah, experience a side of the industry that I never got access to before. And I always looked up to, the Wendy Williams, the
Yeah.
Ebros, and growing up in Jersey and listening to New York City radio was so prevalent growing up. So it was always an interest of mine. But again, I was like, I don't think I like this. I think I want to go in a different direction. And then
Yeah.
eventually I met another A&R who helped me get my my first internship at Def Jam in the mix show and radio department. And from there, I basically worked with Danny Lay, YK Osiris, and it was funny that overlap with Dave East again. We were working on Bieber as well, and I ended up becoming a 1824 college rep, where I worked with 30 plus reps across the country for different digital activations on campus. And I was to be able to take that data, send it to the labels, and say, hey, this actually worked well. We should probably implement this again. But um, ended up being going to Def Jam again as an intern, but as a marketing intern. Great experience there. I got to work on the Janae Aiko Chilumbo album, which was incredible. So, like,
Nice.
pitching for the NPR Tiny Desk, like just the overall concepts around the
Oh, I
volcano.
love those. The Tiny Desk
Yeah, it was
concerts.
sick.
Yeah,
And,
those
and
are
it was so
great.
interesting during that time because it was the pandemic. And it was like, how do we create real life experiences, with not having access to people? And that's when the whole IG Live and streaming became so prevalent. And,
Yeah.
I think it helped her introduce her to a new audience. And I think it was very impactful for her with maintaining and moving her legacy along. And then
And what
from
did you
there,
have? You had mentioned something about an activation, a digital activation, I think.
yeah, so it was like when she would go on maybe IG Live with Big Sean, and I know she wasn't necessarily too keen at the time with showing her private life, justifiably so. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do we find these opportunities that are specialized to her and her brand? So it's like the sound bowls, how do we bring this into a digital space to where it feels natural and comfortable to her? So that was a lot of the ideation that we were making on the marketing side. And, that there was the overlap of digital changing. Like, what is digital marketing? And I think the
Right.
digital marketing team at that time was a lot smaller, but you started to see overlap even now with like press. And but technically NPR Tiny Desk is a press opportunity, but also there's a digital element because this now lives on YouTube, this lives on Instagram, this
Right.
also lives on her page. So but then the marketing person is also piecing this opportunity together. So they all kind of work in an ecosystem that's really cool. But that was like my first big project that I got to work on during my college years. That was incredible. And then I ended
That's
up going to a
awesome.
startup tech company called Loop Live. I was doing some marketing there. We had a lot. It was basically a virtual festival. Or think of like a stage with suites, and it has like maybe it's
Yeah.
sponsored by Pepsi Cola. You can do meet and greets after, but we had some great talent on the platform, like Dua Lipa, BTS, Khalid, and we also got to work with Kevin Durant, Russell Wilson. So,
Wow.
we built a lot of partnerships there to have activations on the platform. Ended up going to Sony Alamo, worked with a lot of hip hop, and I think that was my first, you know, step full time into the business. And I think
Right.
it was so instrumental to my growth and how I saw working with artists on a day to day. But I think it was very special because I think it built my grit, and it also taught me how to communicate and get things that you want out of a situation or what you want to get
Yeah.
done. It definitely taught me my people skills. I definitely had a lot of great experience there. And then I ended up
That's
leaving,
great.
and then now I'm back at Def Jam as a digital marketing manager. So full circle moment for sure.
Yeah,
Awesome.
that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do on a day to day basis? Like if somebody was to come on as a digital marketer, what does that daily routine look like?
So for me, I have a roster of maybe 8 to 10 artists, and every day I'm ideating with the project manager, the marketing manager about what can we do as we're leading into a single, maybe it's an album, an EP. How do we create a timeline that creates the most engagement, awareness, and visibility? Yes, on the ground in real life, but how do we take this in real life interaction and activation and bring it online? So it's a lot of, we're building out their social presence on Instagram. What does that look like? Are you going to have short form content leading into the project? Is it compelling? We're also running ads behind this. So, as we start to build the cadence, okay, we also want to build your CRM, your customer relationship management. Do we have access to your audience's information, like their emails, their SMS, text line, to be able to send them, you know, that you just release something, or you
Right.
have a product to sell. Is super huge for someone's e-commerce. Like, for example, at the beginning of the year, working with Coco Jones, her email list was at about 9,000. um,
Okay.
and with the activation that we were doing, in Q1 leading into her single Taste, and now into the single that just released today, and all the fandemonium and momentum and seeding, like seeding it out to blogs of like the narrative building, the story. And I think if you build a story well enough and people start to gravitate to you and like you and getting those press opportunities, it builds the bigger picture for people to actually want to engage. And so now, she announces a tour. And I think that's where we got a big push to her CRM list. So we went from 9,000 to now we're over 30,000 across email and SMS line. And I think that's a testament to her creativity, and I think strategy, but also I think her likability as an artist. Like, you can make great music, but what are consumers and your audience buying into? The people that like Coco not only like her because they like her music, but they like her because she's personable. She's a girl's girl. Like, people get
Yeah.
it. And people understand that she's being authentic. And authenticity is something you can't replicate, or
You
you
really
can't do
can't.
anything other than you can't do anything
Yeah.
other than be yourself. Yeah, it can't be
Yeah.
fabricated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in this digital age, people are looking for more authenticity. So, like, what are some of the avenues you've utilized to really demonstrate her authenticity?
I think, yes, we do a big job of like, how do we build the cadence and the messaging. But I think what's most important are those press opportunities. I can't, negate the fact that her going on the Terrell show was super huge for people to understand that, hey, this is what Coco is going to sound like when she's on tour. When,
Right.
this is the experience that you're going to get in those little small performance opportunities that she gets, that I'm now seeding out online, that she's also now, you're seeing in the ether, you're seeing how people interact with it, and you can see the real, in real life engagement. And I think
The real
that really,
engagement.
yeah,
Right.
and I
Right.
think those moments are super crucial to building into an album, building into a single, and building into like that liftoff to where I think she's about to go. Um, yeah, I think that's super important.
So you mentioned the activation. What does an activation look like for, an artist like that?
So at the top of the year, we find out, hey, we're about to have a big release. Coco's about to drop. How do we create a moment? How do we, quote unquote, break the internet? So
Yeah.
I was working with her day to day social person that helps us get a lot of stuff up, um, across platforms. And, we basically ideated that it should be new era loading. She goes all black on her socials. This is right after she did her Christmas release in December, like a new era loading, and we started to push a black ominous pre-save at the same time, and people were like, "New era loading, like what is this?" All of a sudden, we get 5,000 pre-save 5,000 signups for people to pre-save the this link, this ominous black link with a countdown. Like, what does this mean? People are interested, and I think that was a great sign that
Interesting.
people find Coco enough compelling to just see a black screen and say, "Hey, I want to engage with you and find out what you have going on next." So that was a
Right.
pretty interesting moment. Then that led us into revealing the record taste that she dropped last month. That created a lot of momentum, conversation, chatter, whether you liked it or not, whether you're comparing her to another artist in the same space as her. I think the moment was to stir conversation leading into her album that's releasing next month.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing. It almost feels like you're kind of like a director of the movie. Like you're just finding different ways to keep the audience engaged and draw them in. Creating different peaks and valleys to really
Yeah,
pull them in.
and I'm working in lockstep with her marketing manager, who's my colleague, and we sort through day to day, and the VP of marketing as well, and VP of digital marketing as well. Like, how do we ideate and create moments that build her lists, but also, obviously build her following. But how does this translate to e-commerce when she starts to, sell touring tickets?
Right.
She's starting to sell merch, running paid media advertising. It all works in a system together cohesively.
Awesome. It seems
Yeah,
like the job is a mixture of creativity and also like data analysis.
it is.
Nice.
So does the creativity does that take precedence, or are you like more data centric, like based on what the numbers are
I
saying? We're
think
gonna
I think we have to be both. Like the goal for us is like we want to hit this benchmark by the end of the year, but also
Sure.
but in order to actually reach that benchmark, I have to make sure that marketing and the creative team are creating content that's compelling enough to be able to circulate across their socials or whatever, even outside of Coco. I think whatever artist that we're looking to build, right? I think it's about being able to capture the attention of your audience. Like there's a developing act that I'm working with, Dende, and with him, his last project, yeah, he just released I Am Because You Are. It's about him being an artiste. Everything that you see in all of his short form, all of the visuals that he's releasing post EP, um, all has to
Right.
do and centered around the concept of this person being the vessel and his muse to his music. And I think the imagery helps paint that picture, and he's gotten a lot of great placements on the commerce side, I think, because of that, and people are starting to get it and understand it. So it's how do we just build towards that, or even Ione, who's only released two singles, but now we're going back to the drawing board. How do we enter this new phase of her first official album? The world building is so crucial to
Right.
the way you place an artist in market. So the data is super important. The data helps you tell the story, and it stirs the direction of where you need to go next. But the creativity is what captures the moment and captures the people.
Can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. A lot of people don't realize it, but I think the marketing is just as important as the technical skill of the artist, because you've had a lot of very talented artists. They might have been up for a little while and then they just disappeared, and it might be because they didn't have the proper team behind them, constantly pushing the narrative, keeping audiences interested.
That too, and I think it's about the platforms that you're using to help drive in your current audience and incoming audiences. We've been having conversations a lot with Station Head and I've been learning more about the incentives that they have to empower the fan. Like a fan can have on their profile how many streams they've had or how many product they've purchased from an artist. And this is huge for us to collect that data, and be able to apply it on, what direction this artist should go into next. And I think these third party platforms, of whether they're doing it IG Live, or there's another platform called Bolt that allows you to put exclusive content, bank it, but you can also get, when you start to put it out on your socials,
Yeah,
people have to share their emails or either their phone number to opt in to be able to see this exclusive content. So it's
I
like,
see.
what digital ways can you reintroduce yourself every time in your content? And I think
Right.
that is what's, can be intriguing, and I think that's what makes it special.
So, what does it look like primarily on the e-commerce side of things?
I guess, what do you mean by that?
Oh, just in general.
E-commerce is huge, which is why in the beginning, whether you're signing a developing artist or you're working with a major artist, but specifically a developing one, finding moments where marketing is now having a listening party, right? But
Yeah,
my job now is to create this link with the innovations team for signups, and there's an opt-in. The people that sign up for this event, we now have your information, so when he or she releases their next product, we can super service it to you without you having to go and search for it. It's going to be right in your email. It's going to be right in your text
gonna be
message.
right there.
Going to be right
Yeah,
there. And
that's
also,
awesome.
social pushes. It's like, if someone's doing a box set, around an album, are they promoting it across socials outside of just the paid advertising we're doing? It's just super instrumental for an artist to lean in to what the product is being sold, whether it's their
Right.
touring, their merch, whatever it may be.
So, like in terms of marketing on social media, I know that sometimes you want to get close to the fans, but not too close. Like you don't necessarily want to be like too in the mix to where they feel like you're common. Like, is there ever a point where you kind of have to say, "Hey, step back and just distance yourself just a little bit"?
I think the larger artists know, they have a good way of knowing how to lean into an audience that may be a healthy relationship versus something that they need to dial back on and kind of, reconvene with management on how they should engage. I think a lot of the artists have it pretty down packed just for the era that we're in. All of us are social media conscious of how we show and appear in the world, so that's not really an issue that we're involved with too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, does the artist usually have probably not complete freedom, but a large amount of freedom to run
They
their
do,
account?
and I think a lot of it is, we tell them their suggestion, or our suggestions of what they should implement. They can take the advice. They may or may not see that it works, and then we reconvene and say, "Hey, this is what didn't work. Your numbers are a little low here, or we didn't see much improvement. Maybe we should reconsider the original idea that I proposed."
I
And
see.
it's not forceful at all. And
Right.
I think there's a new relationship between the artist and the label where it feels more like a partnership rather than the dictatorship, quote unquote, that people might have felt in the past. I don't know. I wasn't there. I can't speak to it, but the conversation that lives out in the space. But I think it does feel a lot healthier, now, with those relationships.
From the outside looking in, it appears that way.
That's good. That's a good thing.
Like, what do you think, Kev?
What was that exactly? What are you asking me?
Oh, what were we just talking about?
Basically, the relationship between an artist and a label, does it
Oh,
feel
right.
more like a dictatorship or is it more of a partnership? And I was saying that it definitely is more of a partnership now.
Okay, yeah. From what I've seen, like I think so because even to get in the door, you pretty much have to already have your following there. So it's like instead of the label quote unquote being your daddy and mommy and telling you everything step by step, they're just like, okay, you already have your following, you have your base. We just kind of want to chip in. We want to. You pretty much got to be ready to go to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's about how, we can empower you and help take it to the next level, for sure.
Awesome.
So do you ever have to deal with like because we're kind of in the age where you can be canceled at a drop of a hat. So like, have you ever dealt with an artist that's kind of a loose cannon and you have to kind of like, hey, rein it in a little bit?
I have not where I'm at now, but previously, and I think that is what was my learning curve. And for
Okay.
example, I made this is when I was a marketing manager, and I was out at a shoot in LA, and this particular artist wanted this other artist that was featured to be at the shoot, but I think something got mixed up with schedules, flights were missed, and I kind of, I had to figure out how to have this conversation with him that, the artist that's featured on this song that you really love cannot attend the night. And I think that was challenging, and things happened, but I think it was a huge learning curve for me to be able to have problem solving skills. And I think that's something that I won't ever forget. But it's moments like that that build you. It's moments like that that help you grow. So I don't look at it as a negative.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely huge. Me being in tech and kind of in more of a leadership position, you have to learn how to, kind of deal with different personalities. I know, like with the industry you're in, you can have what they call like quote unquote divas. People who they have a lot of followers, and sometimes they have the ego to go with it. So, do you have
But
to?
with that, I rather work with someone who's more sure of themselves than someone who isn't, and they're trying looking to me to tell them who they want to be. If
Mm,
Right.
if you're going into a label space, or just being an artist in general, you have to be aware of self in order to, because people again are going to sense that unauthenticity. And I think with that, you need to be sure of how you are translating to your audience. So it's just super um, instrumental on how you show up in the world, for sure.
Absolutely. So, what would you say really got you into music? What got you wanting to professionally pursue a career in music?
Yeah, I think like all of us on this call, we were fans first. I was one of those kids that, well, for starters, I know we talked about this earlier on the call, but I went to a art school called Washington Academy of Music, where I got to learn how to play the trumpet, the piano, the clarinet. I was in choir, violin. We had access to all of this instrumentation at a really young age, but also had the opportunity to learn about the history of music, history of Black music. I got to learn about Sarah Vaughan, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong
Yeah.
at a really
That's
young age.
huge.
It's huge, and it's like, where
Huge.
else were you really learning that? And eventually, I moved, into another school system. But I think those moments really shaped, the music that I listen to, how I see music, how I see it impact society, because we got to learn about the history as well. And
Right.
then, when you're in your teenage years, obviously I was listening to Drake, Party Next Door, Taylor Swift, just, growing up in the early 2000s, mid 2010s. It's so funny saying that now, but those moments,
Yeah.
those moments of like understanding fandemonium, understanding eras of music. And I think with me studying like the 70s, the 60s, because my grandmother was a huge Motown fan. So learning about Berry Gordy and how he built his company off of the assembly line in a way, and like how that applied to labels that came after. It all influenced me. And then looking at growing up, like the Sylvia Rome's, uh, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, but all the women that I basically looked up to growing up that were in the business that paved the way for me now, and studying them as a kid and saying, wow, there's room for me, there's space for me in music, and what does that look like? But actually
Oh, wow.
having representation is huge, and
That's
being able to see
amazing.
yourself. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's really, really important.
for
Is
sure.
what's crazy to me is just how much music variety there is in Black America all throughout time: jazz, techno, house, funk, disco, rap, R&B. Like there's just so much variety there, and you were able to pretty much experience that rich musical tradition. So, you personally, what side do you lean on? Let's just say jazz or funk.
Funk for me.
Yeah.
I feel like just my household, we played a lot of like Luther Vandross, the OJs. It was a lot of soulful music, so soulful funk music. And then, in my late adolescence, I got introduced to like My Chemical Romance and then Avril Lavigne, and I'm
Yeah.
yeah, alternative music I love. It's some of my favorite music, but I do see the intersectionality of hip hop and rock and alternative music. I think they all obviously mesh with the historical context, but yeah, those are definitely my genres that I lean into most.
That brings me back, kind of like you're saying, to Run DMC
Mm-hmm.
when they did that collab with Aerosmith.
Aerosmith. Mm-hmm. It's super impactful. I think being able to see the overlap of two different genres come together, break the barriers of race, music, and
Exactly.
time, it was huge.
Yeah, breaking the barriers of race, I think that's a really interesting point because me growing up, if you're black, you pretty much were expected to stay in these genres. Like, okay, you listen to rap and R&B, and
Hmm.
if you listen to alternative, or there's that, they go with
Yeah.
Oreo or something.
Yeah.
Right.
No, it's about duality. I don't think, people of color should be placed into a box to do one particular genre, which why I think it's important. I keep going back to Coco, but the conversation of, the Britney sample and taste. How does this live in a pop space? Is this going to be appreciated by that audience? But if it's done tastefully, no pun intended, and you're delivering it to the proper audiences, it can be received well. And I think overall it was. But again, I think black artists should be able to define genres outside of just the parameters that they're in, for sure.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of global opportunities for that as well because I'm half Korean, so I kind of study that music scene. And like you mentioned, working with BTS, that group was massive. But
Yeah,
I know Warren G worked with them initially way back, so I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for African Americans to push the music globally.
for sure. And I think even I'm forgetting his name, but it was a K-pop artist that had did a remix with, I think, Usher, and then the Megan Thee Stallion song with the other K-pop artists. I think again the overlap, and I also been learning over the past couple of years how massive. I'm sure we all see it ourselves, but how massive the consumerism is in comparison. It kind of reminds me of the fandemonium of the early 2000s, of
Right.
them actually really buying into the artist, the product. I feel like the mystique of the celebrity and the artist has changed so much because anybody can be an influencer, and I think that's great. But I think also I think it's really important that we continue to hone in and specialize into fandemonium and celebrity of people in the music space that have talent, and nurturing that and making sure that's elevated is what's super important for me.
Right.
Yeah, I know. Typically, we as Americans, we've been able to kind of stay in our domestic market. But me kind of observing some of the other musical trends, reggaeton, a lot of those artists are completely mad. They're just huge, and they don't necessarily have a huge base in America, but globally, they've been able to
Yeah.
spread their music around.
And they're huge on YouTube. Like YouTube is a huge international platform. So is Audio Max, specifically in Africa. I think South Africa. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think sometimes in America we kind of get close into a bubble of like what's just inside of us, but the world is so massive. And I think that's what's so special about taking these acts that I work with to eventually push them to a global scale. It allows you to dig deeper and even look at what other people are doing in the market, to defy and break barriers.
For sure. And it makes me think of, Kev mentioned reggaeton, like Bad Bunny. He's just everywhere.
Yeah, that Calvin Klein
Everywhere.
campaign was gorgeous, amazing. But you think about moments like that that stem from the music, that stem from when a couple years ago he went back to Puerto Rico and it was performing on top of the gas station, and also connecting himself to his roots no matter what. And I
Yeah.
think it's also, again, authenticity is why it continues to grow so massively in the way that it has.
D- have you been kind of like making a push to get your artists to stop thinking just domestically and become more of a global artist? And
Surprisingly, a lot of the acts that I work with think globally. They
okay,
think, what can I do outside of just being in R&B? How do I push myself in pop? A lot of them,
Right.
don't necessarily want to stay just in R&B. And I think R&B is incredible. I think it's the underbelly of, modern contemporary music. But I think, you know, as you continue to want to grow into another threshold, you take those roots, and how do you, kind of remix it and take it to the next level. But that R&B root will always be with the artist nonetheless, but it's how do we make this palatable, how do we make this digestible for, a massive audience outside of, just that niche, you know audience.
Right.
so I know like eventually, if you keep doing the same thing, you get stale, especially musically. Like, have you had to like really push some of your artists to pivot their sound so that it's not growing stale?
Well, I haven't had to, really be on that side as of yet, but I have friends that are artists that speak to me and talk to me about, look to me for advice about what the artists that are signed to majors, what are they doing to push the needle. So for me, I guess to your question of like, I guess what's your question again? I'm sorry.
Uh, dang, dang, I kind of forgot. My mind just slipped me.
I,
Um,
I guess being able to change your sound.
okay, yeah, yeah. To keep their sound from growing stale, like have you had to push them to? So say for example, you can't rap like you did in the '90s and still be in the 2000s. You have to
Yeah.
switch it up. You
Yeah.
kind of went from G
But
funk to
again, I think there's a lot of artists that can be able to take the elements of rap or style from the 90s and reinvent it. I think, again, it's
Yeah.
how do you reinvent it? How do you make it fresh? How do you make it new? You can have those influences to your music, but how do you bring it to the modern day? So,
Right. That's
I have
very
seen a lot of
important.
developing artists in New York, like Life of Tom. He is a rapper based out of, I think, Brooklyn, New York, or I think in Harlem. But again, he has that same grittiness of like the Wu Tang era, or
Yeah.
the late '90s. But I think with him, what makes him so special is that, again, he's authentic. He has great short form visuals. His visuals are incredible, and I think that's what keeps you captivated. But as far as where an artist wants to take it sonically, I think that, again, they have to sit with themselves and understand what is the next phase and transition they want to be. And I think a great example of this is, looking at a Kanye West, of someone who's morphed into a different artist every single album, or The Weeknd, who morphs into an artist every time, or Beyonce. I think the
Right.
greats find a way to be able to reinvent themselves, but also staying true to the musicality and understanding what their audience likes, even if they may not know if their audience will like it initially. At least they know there'll be conversation around it.
Right.
yeah, yeah. I think it's really important to take risks so you don't kind of become that legacy act that your sound, your time is
Yeah.
past, the sound is vintage.
And then
So
it
yeah.
just becomes like a nostalgia act at
Mhm.
that point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in my industry, you've always got to learn something new. You always have to keep progressing, or you'll get left behind in the past. And what about you personally? Like, how are you keeping your knowledge fresh? Like, how do you avoid growing stagnant as a digital marketing manager?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, I'm always thirsty for knowledge, always, you know, hungry for whatever I can get my hands on next to be able to help expand my mind, help me grow, not only in my career, but as a person. Because, I think going through this business, you have to make sure your sense of self is maintained in order to do well and succeed at your job. So I'm always going to seminars, reading articles, whether, even looking at short form content on TikTok about, new softwares, new opportunities in the industry. I think it's always being hungry for knowledge, is what is the pinnacle for me.
That's super important. Yeah.
So, like technologically, what are some of the emerging trends? Like, I know obviously we have AI, or what are some of the other technologies that are really like helping you at your job?
Well, I know a lot at UMG. There has been a huge not I wouldn't how can I put it? There's conversations at UMG about certain softwares that don't affect the creativity and also don't affect the exclusivity and the integrity of the artist. And I think AI is an incredible tool, but we also have to make sure we're being careful with it. And your IP, your intellectual property is everything. And having that reinvented through a software, which is incredible, but how can we work with these new AI softwares to be able to push the needle forward, not, essentially, do the job for us? Because I think at the end of the day, the human mind I think, is more special than any piece of technology, and I think that's where the technology is trained from the human mind. But we
Absolutely.
just have to be careful with it. But for me,
Yeah.
and some of the technologies that I've been using, a lot of it has been CRM based platforms to be able to have that connectivity to the artist that I'm working with, and their audience. So it's still an ongoing conversation, but I'm looking into new things every day. But we just have to be particular about what we're utilizing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think in AI, from some of the past guests that I've talked to, it could be a potential litigation minefield. Like if you're bringing the AI generated music in, if it's kind of trained on copyrighted music and you're utilizing that in a song, then who knows where that can lead you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like there are a lot of softwares where we're working with one now, that can create a remix of a song, or the DJ blends. It does it for you
Yeah.
to put on TikTok. So
Wow.
that one was approved, but there's some other ones out there that are still basically being litigated with UMG and those companies.
Like, have you heard any, or have you felt like any fear from artists of, okay, this AI can generate video, can create, AI creators like music as well. So you can essentially create a digital AI generated artist.
No, I don't think there has been as much, I guess, reluctancy from the artists about AI at the moment. A lot of them don't necessarily bring it up. They don't feel like they're going to be, you know, discarded because of AI. No, a lot of
Right.
them feel pretty strong in their creativity and who they are. And I think there's a lot of protections that, the larger conglomerates like a Warner, Sony, and UMG, I think they recently just band together to have conversations around AI. So, you know,
That's great.
the main goal is always to make sure the artist is being empowered first.
Right.
Awesome. So yeah, we've talked a lot about the musical industry, but what do you like to do outside of music?
Yeah. I'm a nature girl. I'm from Jersey, so there's a lot of trees around me, a lot of grassland. I work out a lot. I go for runs. I box a little bit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I do a lot of extracurricular activities, just like kayaking. The spring's coming, the summer's coming, so excited for that. Water sports. But for me, I hang out with my community, my friends, my family. I love to read. Again, always that thirst for knowledge. But yeah, I think for me, I just like to be at peace, to be quite honest with you, and enjoy the fruits of life. So whether it's having a new experience at an event, going to art galleries, even going to a seminar about a new technology, I'm into it all. So I'm always open for new experiences to help expand my mind and myself.
Right. So you're looking for that richness.
Yeah, richness to life.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, variety is definitely the spice of life. So you mentioned you're into reading. What are some of the more interesting books that you've read lately?
Recently, I've been reading James Baldwin, Nothing's Personal, and I'm actually looking at my bookshelf now. I just finished up Bell Hooks All About Love, which was great. Um, and someone just referred another, I think it's by Nikki Giovanni, but yeah, I'm looking at my bookshelf, like what's over there. But I've also been looking into some of my older textbooks from college, oddly, just on marketing, just how it's changed, and looking at new editions now. Because I was just having a conversation with a professor over at a university, and she was saying she's the director of marketing there, and she was basically saying, um, marketing and digital, sooner or later, that she was saying that digital title was going to change, because at the end of the day it's all going to be marketing. It's just that times are changing and now we have to put titles to everything, but eventually that will, I guess, kind of subside and it'll just turn into marketing roles again, because obviously it's second nature for it to be digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I might be a little bit older than you. I kind of grew up in the '90s before technology really took over. How do you really feel like technology is just impacting our day to day lives? Like I used to see a lot of kids playing outside, and now it's almost like a ghost town. Everybody's on their tablet.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I was the last couple of generations to be able to have that duality of doing both, of playing outside, but also we're playing video games after 9, maybe if it's a weekend, or there's the DSi and it's all these cool new gadgets to experience technology in a new way. But it wasn't to the capacity where it is now, where there's an iPhone in my hand all the time. What does this mean? And I think it just comes down to censorship from the parents. It's like, you now have to be intentional to give your child that the option for both, and not be so heavily reliant on one. And I understand that's where technology is going. Kids are learning on tablets. I don't even think they're really writing on papers anymore. So I remember having a pencil and paper and a notepad and a book bag full of books. That's changed. I think it's just a
Yeah.
laptop now.
Just a
So
laptop these days, probably.
yeah, I think it's about being intentional of giving playtime to kids, but also saying, "Hey, this is where the world's going. You should probably learn this." And I think there's so much information out there, but as a parent, I think it's more so about funneling the garbage from the gold, in a way of like, is this actually going to elevate my kid and help them grow?
Yeah, I mean, I know when I think back to high school, me and Kev are pretty close in age. No one had a cell phone. So, maybe junior year, I had almost like a backup cell phone for if I missed my bus, I
Hmm.
need to call my mom. Okay, you get to open the flip phone up, power it up, make that 1 minute phone call. But even that was expensive back then. So, no one's texting in class, no one's checking their voicemails, playing games. Like it was just very different. We
And that's
grew
funny.
up in
That
a
was
very
my
different time. Yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, there's iPods, your AirPods, and your weren't AirPods yet. There were headphones in your ear, with the wire from Apple, and teachers are telling you like, "Hey, take those out," or "Stop texting in class," or "I'm gonna send you to 8212," or you know, um, I think that was a big issue, a nuanced issue for my generation, of being on our phones so much, and then it just exacerbated as we graduated and the incoming generation came in. I think it probably got worse, unfortunately.
Yeah, the interesting thing about technology to me is that it connects us more than ever, but it makes us more isolated than ever.
Yeah, and I guess, not to dwell on the negatives, I do think now more than ever there is that connection between, generationally. Like, I can go on TikTok and find somebody that's in their 40s or 50s, and be able to learn about their experiences from my phone. Or I can go on another side of TikTok and I can see 15, 16-year-olds talking about their experiences, about where they are in 2025. Or even you think about the conversations that happened on Twitter, and people being able to unite on certain social issues or just content, entertainment. I think it allows us to connect more than ever, and be able to share and compare information.
Yeah, I think you have to really be intentional about it, but the internet really allows us to find our tribe, and once we find it, we have to kind of go out and pursue it, and maybe even attempt to meet them in person or something. Like you don't want to just always leave everything in a digital space. I know me in the tech industry,
Yeah.
it can be like really isolating.
Yeah, and I think that is also another um compartment of just being connected on the internet, but you can also be so disconnected as well. Like I met some influencers who show up very vibrant on social media, but then you meet them in person, they're super introverted, and you're like, huh, this is not how you show up. But I think social media allows you to create an identity in a way that helps you feel more confident in yourself. But I think it's also important to know, again, authenticity, knowing who you are outside of just having, that phone and that screen and that following at the accessibility of your fingertips.
Because you get to develop ultimately your brand.
Yeah,
What is this? What is this going to look like? What is this going to look like to people, to fans, etc.?
yeah, exactly.
And what I'm finding just across all, careers, just in life in general, people are searching for more of that authentic, more of that real experience because we're in a time where, like you mentioned, things can be fabricated really quickly. So just being able to find, I guess, maybe that bad last bastion of humanity,
Yeah.
I think that's
That's
what a
why I think
lot
it's
of us.
super important to have. I think I was just talking about this with one of my colleagues. She works at Columbia, and just with all the changes that are happening in the country, it feels like this year is going to be a super creative time, specifically this summer. There'll probably be a lot more outside events that hopefully people aren't charging $50 at the door, and it's more about building your community and taking that from a digital space to in real life. So I'm interested to see how these next couple of months will go.
Yeah, this has probably been one of the most action-packed years I've ever experienced in life.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, like, have you ever watched movies like Juice or so
Yeah.
you remember like when
Have.
they had like they were playing like doing the whole DJ battles and things, and you had a crowd full of people.
Mm-hmm.
Does that still exist where you're at? Because out here is I don't really see that kind of thing much.
Um, I have not seen a ton of rap battles, but I will say I've seen the DJ be again empowered in a way where you're following the DJ to at events. It kind of reminds me of the 80s and in the 90s, and I think that's been really cool to watch progress over the past couple of years. Like it's not about sometimes the person who's even curating the event. It's about can this DJ, can this MC, because you're also buying into the fact that how they have stage presence and again authenticity and the way they're
Right.
showing up to curate an event. So, but to your point, no, I haven't seen a ton of rap battles, but there are a ton of like I would say indie um open mics in a way. Open mic, I've seen a lot more of those, or showcases, or there's a couple bubbling performers on one set, for example. There's this platform. It's ran by a few college kids. One of them interns with me, but it's called That Good Shit. And the founder, Annabelle, she curates a ton of events, but she's also interviewing artists, developing artists, not only just artists that are signed to labels, but anyone who's shaping and shifting culture. And I think that's what's really special, being able to lean into, you know, community. Or one of my friends, Egypt, she does this event called Listening is Fundamental, and it's about understanding, being intentional about listening to the sample of a song. It's a bingo game, but yeah, but can you
Nice.
catch this sample on a song? Okay, if you do, you put it. You have to get, obviously you bingo. You get 4 or 5 row in a row, and then you get a prize. But I think that's also been a great hub. She's about to be on her 2 year anniversary this Sunday. I'm gonna go. You two are more than welcome to come if you can. Kev, I don't know if you're in New York, but um,
Oh, now I'm in
yeah,
Texas.
you're in Texas. Sorry, but yeah, I think there's been intentionality about building spaces and community in New York City that feel good. So I think it's heading towards a good place.
Awesome.
Awesome. So like going kind of back to the 70s, we've had like huge bands, Earth, Wind and Fire, Frankie Beverly and Maze, going into the 80s, it started moving more synth based. 90s. We still had like groups like Boys to Men, Jodeci, etc. Now it seems to become more
Yeah.
and more isolated, like single artists. Do you foresee a time when groups come back and
This is so
bands?
funny you're asking this question. I'm working with a group right now that's literally texting my phone. Our CEO of Def Jam recently signed them to BYG, and they're massive across TikTok and Instagram for making short form videos of them singing renditions of your favorite R&B pop songs. And now we're trying to transition them from being this internet sensation of just singers, four boys that sing on camera, to real full-fledged artists and that work
Right.
with kids. And we're leaning into the whole B2K era, the mindless behavior era,
Yeah.
Jodeci, or Boys to Men they also look up to. And I think what's really special about them, they've studied the culture, they're fans first, and they're students of the culture. And I think that's why I think they'll be received well. So I feel confident about them.
Nice.
Awesome. So like in the 2000s, we had, like trap, crunk, etc. What is like the sound now? Like, is it drill or?
It depends what region. I
Mm,
think music is not in a space, I think it hasn't been for the past 20, 30 years, where you can say there's one particular sound across the nation. I think every city has its hub of music. And hip hop is also changing. Hip hop has become a place of so many intersectional genres of just, hip hop and rock, hip hop alternative, hip hop and R&B. I think there's so much overlap, and I think there's certain sounds of like a Florida artist may sound like a New York artist, or a New York artist might sound like an Atlanta artist. I think it's definitely changed the landscape, but I think there is still, at the end of the day, the way that people dress and show up in the world again is where you can see that differentiation in culture.
yeah, it does seem like over time, especially in more recent times, things have become more homogenous culturally. Like
Hmm.
sometimes you look at somebody, it's a little harder to tell where they're from. Whereas, in the 90s, each region was super distinct. Like
Yeah,
everybody sounded completely different. I think the internet kind of bridged that gap, and fashion and even how we speak spread slang.
yeah. But I think it's allowed people to collaborate more with connecting to one another digitally. So, that artist from Florida may sound like that artist from New York, but those two probably linked up and created a special record together that will hopefully,
Right.
back the digital space. So,
Right.
yeah, it really all depends how you look at it.
So y'all know we're kind of at the top of the hour, but can you tell us about like some of the musical acts that we should start looking out for?
For sure. I've been a big fan for the past couple of years of Destin Conrad, and I think his story is so interesting because, similar to a Summer Walker, I watched him in high school on Vine. So watching him make funny, humorous videos, had no idea this guy sung until maybe I was in college, and he put up his first, you know, um, live digital performance, I think on YouTube or something like that. And over the past couple of years, his music has only gotten better, and I think he has a great manager. I think he has the great same manager as Kaylani. So, I think his direction and how he's pushing the needle in the R&B space has been great. I'm a huge fan of Elmine. I get to work on Elmine over at Def Jam, but I think what's been interesting to watch with him is that he's a UK artist, but he's so beloved by the US audience. Like, for example, we had a call with management the other day, and he came to New York to see um, Cleo Soul's concert in New York. And they were basically saying so many people kept coming up to him like, I love you, thank you so much for what you're doing in music. And I think why people love Elmine, yes, his digital presence, but I think again, it's always about his authenticity. He's being himself in whatever room he's in, and I think that's what translates more than anything. And the music is just a bonus.
I think that's that common theme that we're seeing, authenticity, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, one artist I would say to be on the lookout for, I don't know if you heard of him, is La Russell.
Yeah. No, he's from LA, right?
Yeah, he's from, I think, Vallejo.
Okay, but definitely Cali based, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I've seen him. I think what caught my attention that he was doing these community based events, that I thought was really cool. He was rapping, but I think he was also doing giveaways and bringing community together. That I thought was really special, similar to what Nipsey Hussle was doing a little bit, before he passed away.
Yeah, I like him because he actually has, like, more positive stuff in his raps. He actually
Mhm.
say, like, take care of your kids, and you know
Yeah,
that's good to hear,
yeah,
especially
it is.
yeah, because rap can be a pretty negative genre at times.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
good to see somebody buck that trend.
No, I think that's why it's important, wherever you sit in hip hop, that there's just variety. You can have your street rap, but also let's make sure there's a balance in rap that has intentionality and, to spread a message, maybe a more positive message. But I think you also have to be able to tell the story of what's actually happening on the streets, even if it may feel a little violent to the air, but this is the experience that, they're actually going through. But, it's also on the job of the parent to tell their kids that, hey, like, this is not, this is probably not the path that you want to go down, but this is also what's actually happening in the world as well.
Absolutely. I know you probably got to head on out soon, but we definitely appreciate you having on the show. Did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
I think the theme of this conversation has been authenticity, and my day to day, I'm speaking to artists about how they want to show up digitally, and a lot of them are scared to post, and I think that's been a conversation not only that I have with myself, but obviously other people of being perceived, and I think that could be a little scary. Putting things out into the ether, like even coming on this podcast and knowing that this is going to sit out on YouTube, to be transparent, it startles me a little bit, but I think there's something important that I have to share with the community out there. So, I think I want people in general, not just artists, to get out of their head, get out of their own way with sharing their light and their knowledge and their gift and their talents. So I think if you do feel a little reluctant to show up, I think, just take some time, sift through how you want to appear in the digital space, and then, the first thing to do is take the first step. It's the first video you put up. It's that first song
Right.
you put out there. It's
Right.
about taking that leap of faith is what's most important.
You have to do it at some point. You just have to upload that track or
Yeah,
upload that video and, just see how it's received.
for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if this is your first podcast, but I think you did an amazing job.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah, you're a natural.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, we also like to thank everybody for tuning in. If you ever want to come back, let us know. We'll definitely have you back.
All right. Thank you both. I appreciate
All
it.
right.